Perspectives, different views, one voice.
All right, so welcome to the LDM Perspective. This is our podcast platform open to the community. I'm your host, Mo, and I'm joined here with my friends today.
Cam,
Ali.
Kojo.
And we're joined by a guest today. We're joined by Lawrence. Welcome, Lawrence, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, guys. Excited to be on here.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about mental health and how it can affect us. I know this is something that has been slowly brewing up in the community in terms of conversations that we wanted to have. And we're joined here by Lawrence today, so I just thought let's just get a quick little intro from Lawrence.
So my name's Lawrence Tajani. I own a social enterprise working with disengaged children. I also own my own web design business, and I'm a former teacher, taught for 11 years in a secondary school. So got a lot of experience working with children. And like you said earlier, mental health is a big, big thing in secondary schools at the moment. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Perspectives, different views, one voice.
So I just thought we might as well just jump straight into it, really. What is mental health and how many different types or forms can appear? Are you guys familiar with any?
I mean, I come across it a lot in my work. A lot, clients I represent, a lot of them will be dealing with mental health issues in one form or another and will be receiving some form of treatment. So I have sort of, I'd say, a limited understanding. And I do have an understanding to some degree, but it's limited. So if I'm representing someone at court and they may be displaying signs of just sort of a lack of understanding, they may be displaying sort of unusual behaviour in their thought process or what they may be saying, then I may have them assessed by a mental health professional to see if they're even fit to enter a plea or whether they even understand the case that's being put before them.
Okay, I think from my perspective is when I first really kind of got an idea of what mental health was, is when I experienced it. You know, I suffer from epilepsy about 6 years ago, had a severe epileptic attack, banged my head in my office on my desk, was rushed to hospital, and was in hospital for about 6 weeks to 2 months. And I had to learn to walk again. So got discharged from hospital, and there was a lot of support around me. But when you get discharged from hospital, people think you're okay. You know, that support kind of goes away. Like, people are still checking in on you, but they feel like you've got over the big hurdle of it. So not being able to go back to work straight away, everyone's at work, you actually start to feel a bit isolated, you know, and you're with your thoughts by yourself. And there was pain. There's a lot of pain from the recovery of trying to learn to walk and get things in motion again. And I think that's when I first encountered depression, but I didn't realize that was depression. It took another good 4 years to actually understand maybe I'm suffering from depression, you know. And when it came out, it wasn't actually in a conversation with people. The easiest way for me to do it was in a blog post. So I wrote a letter to depression, in the sense that depression's always lurking in my house like an unpaid bill, you know? So I took that perspective because I found it hard to actually maybe sit down with my boys, family, even my wife, because I feel in the black community, talking about mental health is a taboo. We're all just meant to be okay. You're meant to be strong. And particularly as a man, I would say, and just kind of deal with it, you know? Whatever happens, you deal with it and you get on with it. But it's not the case. And I think during the course of the conversation, because that's only one aspect of mental health, it opens up a bit more of what we can talk about in the different ones in terms of like anxiety disorders as well, you know, eating disorders, there's loads. So that was my first encounter with mental health.
Question. You mentioned that after you went to the hospital, you went back home, you was lonely, right? And then that trigger again as a depression side of that.
See, I wouldn't even know that at that time there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know that as a trigger.
Okay.
I know that's a trigger now.
Yeah.
Because I went to go and seek help. Then it was just like, what's wrong with me? You know, I've got family, you know, I'm loved, people are around me. But it was pure frustration, I thought was at first. But then you wake up some days and you're just like, I don't want to get out of bed. Like, I'm going to go on aeroplane mode. That's actually a phrase that is used amongst my friends now. Like, so if they haven't heard from me, they're like, Lawrence, you're on aeroplane mode. You know, that's our joke between us to say, actually, let's approach this conversation. Is everything all right with you? You know, what's going on? So I would just shut off from the world. Wouldn't switch my TV on, you know, wouldn't speak to my wife. It would be just, hey, yeah, not much. And no one knew that I was going through that. I think everyone put it down to he's recovering, you know, he's finding it hard. And that's what I put it down to. So it's not on anyone else, because if I can't recognize it, how are my friends meant to recognize it? And I think it's given it that forum to be quite open and aware to speak to your friends about it. I still have some friends now, and you can see, like, they want to kind of help and talk about it, but they find it hard to listen to. But on the other hand, people come to me and speak to me about, like, yeah, this is what I'm going through, you know. So by me opening up through that blog post, I was shocked. The amount of support that I got, the phone calls I got, people direct messaging me on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, it blew me away that actually there are loads of people, female, males, suffering from depression, but actually just can't pinpoint it that this is what it is. And actually it is so hard to actually say those words, that I'm suffering from depression, because you feel like, am I going to be judged on top of that?
You said it took you about 4 years to recognise that it was depression that you were suffering from. What scenario, what specific thing allowed you to recognise that it was depression at that particular point? Had you sought treatment? Had you sought help, or was it before?
So it was just not talking to people. I like to talk, and Mo knows, like, that's stopping me from talking, man. Yeah. Like, I just wasn't myself, you know. And funny enough, I was in one of the lessons, and a kid came up to me and said, "Sir, are you okay?" I said, what do you mean? And he's like, "You just don't seem yourself. You just don't seem your bubbly kind of, you know, motivated. You just don't seem yourself." And I kind of just went home that night, and I just thought, right, have I been lashing out at people? You know, and I had been lashing out at people, you know, just like, don't talk to me, you're just not getting this, you're not getting that. And actually it was me. So then I made a decision to actually contact the doctor, and that was probably, like, and I've been through a lot of health issues, one of the hardest things I've had to do. So you go in to see your GP, and your GP's like, right, what's wrong with you today? And normally you point to your arm, your leg, or something, you know, a headache. And I'm like, look, I'm not feeling myself. And he's like, what do you mean? And he went straight into it. Are you feeling suicidal? I'm like, whoa. I'm not feeling suicidal. I'm just not feeling myself, you know. And that kind of wanted me to kind of, like, get out that room straight away, because he went straight for, like, suicidal. I'm like, no, I'm not feeling that way. But I would say even then the process was to fill out this whole application to go and get help from an expert. And I found that uncomfortable, like, reading through the questions, because I thought actually I'd done the hardest bit of going to speak to someone face to face. I wanted that human interaction. I didn't want to, you know, say, these are my feelings in an application form, like I'm applying for a job, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? And then once I did do it, the next conversation was about medication. I'm like, no, I don't want medication. I just want to be able to talk. And, like, my wife's there, don't get me wrong, but sometimes you just want to talk to someone who doesn't know you, who's not judging you. Not saying my friends were, but where you just feel like actually I'm going to have this conversation with you, and then I'm going to leave this room, and I kind of got off my chest.
Yeah.
There's this colleague that I used to work with, and he goes to a therapist once a week, just to talk to the therapist about his week, just to get off his chest, and feels better. He said it's his approach of actually like going to the gym.
Okay.
That he just talks there. And she or he would just do ad-libs like, so what do you think about this? Asking him questions, And that just kind of helps him get through his own thought process,
Lawrence, this depression is really hitting me as well. Is it because of achievement, would you say, for your own context of it? Is it because you felt like you haven't had an achievement in a certain area when it hits you? Or is it just because of too much work, too much pressure?
I think that could happen for a number of people.
Yeah.
I think with mine, specifically going back to having to learn to walk again and being frustrated with my epilepsy of like that's kind of taking control of my life to a certain degree and not being in charge of what I wanted to do. So say, for example, not being able to drive for a year if I have an epileptic attack. Like, I can't drive for a year. That's kind of almost my power being taken away from me, having to ask someone to go and drop me there. That's not me. I've always been quite independent.
Yeah.
And the frustration of like the pain, because I suffer from severe pain disorder where I'm in pain every day, and it's just dealing with that, going in that cycle, and just kind of like I was kind of on this path and now it's changed, and how do I adapt to that? So that kind of like got to me. And am I going to be seen as Lawrence, the old Lawrence? And when I think about that now, and I say that out loud, the old Lawrence, why does anyone want to be perceived as the old person? Because everything should be about growth.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the old person, because if you're the old person, you're not moving forward.
No.
It's only when I say it out loud that doesn't make sense when I'm saying the old Lawrence,
Yeah, so actually, I've just been listening to a few things that you've been saying, though, and I guess for me, I just want to understand, because obviously it seems that there's been a lot of challenges that you've had to face, and you clearly look well, you've been dealing with it quite well, which is great to see. But when in your life did these things, were you always aware that you had epilepsy? Were you always aware that you had pain? When in your life were you more aware of these kind of things that you've mentioned to us?
Okay, so I had an attack. My first attack was actually Christmas Eve, when I was about 16, 17. And I just finished doing a double shift. I'd got back home, I remember it quite well. And I was watching Star Wars with my brother and my sister. Now, I'm not photosensitive epileptic. Mine's called idiopathic epilepsy. There is actually a wide range of different types of epilepsy. So a lot of people think it's strobe lighting. I don't suffer from that. And I had the attack then and woke up on Christmas Day in hospital with a man singing Jingle Bells, a drunk man in the hospital singing Jingle Bells, literally. And I was completely confused where I was. So I think at that point, I was like, whoa, 16, like, come on, like, as a young man, you're like, whoa, this is life-changing for me. So it was getting through that, that change. And then I had another severe epilepsy attack when I was in university, and I lost my memory for, I think, the last 2 years, where I thought I was back in college, So I remember looking at my girlfriend at that time, Sheridan, and just going, "Oh, you put on weight." That's the wrong thing to say to your missus when you come around, because I remembered her from obviously college, if that makes sense.
Jesus.
So people always go to me. So the next question people always ask me, I say, "I've lost my memory." They're like, "Have you got all back?" And I always go, "I don't know." I lost my memory. So it was going through that, and then the big one was when I was, I think, about 27, when I had the one where I hit my head and was in hospital and had to learn to walk again. So it's always been there from the age of 16 in the background, but got to a point where it was heightened, where it was affecting day to day and what I was doing. But the one I had at 27 was probably the most life-changing attack because that's when the chronic pain started. That's when I had to learn to walk again. That's when 4 years down the line, I'd realised I was suffering from depression. So it was a lot at one go happening. So I was like, wow, you know.
And just regarding the type of epilepsy that you have, do you mind just breaking that down a bit? What's there? Because the one that I'm used to is the one that you said about photosensitivity and all that kind of stuff.
So mine's idiopathic epilepsy. So that sounds really cool. Sounds like very grand. Yeah. But it basically means they don't know what causes my epilepsy. Exactly. Right. So like when I first heard it, I'm like, oh, okay, idiopathic, and then broke it down. Like, yeah, we're not really sure what causes it. So it's about trying to keep a diary. Up to this day, I don't know. So some of it could be stress. You know, I find I have more attacks when I have sleep deprivation. You know, because I don't sleep. If I look at my phone, my average sleep is like 4 hours a month. In a day, like literally, that's my average sleep, 4 hours. So it's stuff like that. So pain. If I'm in pain, I'm not sleeping. Do you see what I mean? Then I'm stressed about not sleeping. So it's that whole kind of vicious cycle that you keep on going around on, you know? So that's my type of epilepsy.
And then you mentioned the pain. So when did this pain begin? Because in regards to what you've kind of mentioned, I know 16 is when you had that episode at home and stuff. But the pain, was that part of it since 16 or just that
No.
on and off? What?
So the pain started after when I had 6 years ago.
6 years ago?
Yeah. So when I was in hospital for about 2 days, after that attack, I couldn't feel my legs. And it was crazy because I kind of thought like, whoa, am I going to walk again? You know, it seems like it's a short amount of time now, but those 2 days, I kid you not, I was scared to even ask the doctor that question, am I going to walk again? Because I didn't want to know the answer. And when I finally plucked up the courage to ask the doctor, in their typical way, it was like, okay, we'll just see how things go, which is basically code for we don't know. You see what I mean? So when I got the feeling back in my legs, it came back with a vengeance. So it felt like someone was using a chisel and hammer in my kneecap. Jeez. So just going doof, 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 doof. So yeah, like consistently. And like since then, I was on, well, in that period of time, on my height, about 36 tablets a day, just to function in terms of getting through the pain and everything, on top of my epileptic meds. So yeah, like it's gone down now, but I'm on a lot of painkillers just to function. So ever since then, I'm in pain every day. As I'm sitting down speaking to you now, I'm in pain. It's just a different levels of pain each day. So like today, I'm using my walking stick because the pain's at its height and, you know, it's bad. But then you could see me next week in the gym and I could be squatting. And then people are like, what? I just saw you on Instagram, Lawrence. You know?
Transformer.
And then like, and you can see like they want to ask you the question and like trying to understand it. And I don't mind. That's the thing. I think since talking about it, I'm more of an open book about myself. Because what I realized from the response I got from talking about my depression is that it helped other people. Yeah. Okay. It's not about me just going, oh yeah, I want to tell people this and tell people that. It's actually what it can do for other people. And I think that's the thing about social media. Look, I love social media. It's part of my business and what I do. But I think social media at times shows you one side. It doesn't show you the 360. So if you look at my social media, you get the 360. You get me in hospital. You get me at the doctor's. You get me doing a blog. You get me celebrating my success. Yeah. Because I'm not just going to show you the good times, because that's not life. No. Like, please tell me someone who gets good times all the way through. I want to speak to them because I need to know what they're doing, you know.
And I guess for me, really, in regards to the pain threshold, if you're looking at it from, let's say, 1 being very low and 10 being very high, on average, what would you say like your pain threshold? I know today you mentioned about, today we say today is about 9, you say.
No, today's not even a 9. I think if it was a 9, I wouldn't be here being able to do the thing with you. So on a day-to-day, I would say pain can be about a 4 or 5.
Okay.
Where you're just like, you know. But I would say my pain threshold is probably a lot higher than other people's.
Yeah.
And where it's the 9 is I'm not getting out of bed.
Okay.
It's to the point where like I'm having to take morphine, so I can take morphine at home. These things. So, yeah.
I guess going back, I swear I'm asking a lot of questions.
That's fine.
Just fine. And I guess going back, you've mentioned the major like episodes that you've had, but in between, I'm guessing there are some like challenges as well, because you've mentioned 3 major events of what's happened so far, especially you being 27, being one of the most reflecting one so that you've had. But in between, so how's the day to day? So can you just have like a fit, and what as a normal? Is there such thing as a normal fit for you, or what a major? Do you get what I mean? Because you've mentioned like 3.
Okay.
How does that look like?
So you have a full tonic seizure. And a full tonic seizure is like when you collapse and you're unconscious and your body is shaking.
Yeah.
Then you might have myoclonic jerks. So I will have myoclonic jerks sometimes, and that tends to be when I wake up. So that would be just my arm would just jerk in the morning. So sometimes I've burnt myself with tea and stuff like that. So what I've learned is don't go and try and make yourself a cup of coffee straight away in the morning. Let my body wake up. And that's kind of me having to adapt to that. But what I wasn't doing in the beginning was I was ignoring that.
Okay.
And I was just going, no, this is Lawrence.
Yeah.
This is Lawrence. I'm going to do this. This is the way I do it. So I was very stubborn and not going, actually, you need to adapt to what your life is now. It's not to say you can't achieve what you want to. You need to just take a step back. And I think that's what goes into that whole mental approach and kind of like trying to see yourself different, you know, and realizing that.
So just stepping back a bit, in regards to like a mental state, how did you develop like, because you sound like this is a challenge that you've taken on, knowing exactly what's going on with your body and accepting that and making others aware of that. But how did you get to that? Because you mentioned from 16 to 27, that's about what, 11 years? So when, I'm guessing that 27 was like the moment, but how did you, I'm just trying to understand what mechanisms you use for your mental state. I know one of them you mentioned was going to see someone to talk through it, but what other things would you like advise someone that's having some challenges regarding mental health?
So I think I have to be very careful on that. What works for me won't necessarily work for someone else.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to find what I would say is your happy place. You know, so for me, I find it hard when I'm in extreme pain because I like an hour to shut off from the world, and that's in the gym. So not being able to go to the gym when I'm in pain, I'm like, right, how do I get to that happy place? And even like in the last 2 weeks, I found it extremely hard, you know, where it's just like, I can't get to the gym. You know, everyone's at work. I'm working by myself remotely. How do I get that balance? But it's realizing that's that trigger there, that trigger is actually, I'm in pain. You know, I'm not able to get to the gym. And that's where I go back to going to things that priceless moments and the things that I've got in my life that are like amazing and celebrate that. You know, I've got an amazing wife who supported me all the way through and to this day is my rock because we got together in college. So she's seen, I'd like to hope she's seen this, but a growth as a man, you know, in terms of not pushing her away and actually speaking to her. So it's being open with her and saying, look, this is how I'm feeling. And that's not an issue no more, whereas before that used to be an issue because I didn't see my dad do that, you know. Or even just stepping back a little bit is when I did write that letter about depression and publish it on my blog, I didn't give my mum and dad a heads up about it. I just shared it in the family WhatsApp group, you know. And the response to it was, it was interesting, man. It was interesting because I'm Nigerian, come from a Nigerian background. And the first thing when I spoke to my pops, and to be credit to them, their views changed a lot. It was a learning process for them. And that's one thing I take my hat off to my parents. You know, they might not get it straight away, but they are willing to learn. Was like, never mention depression. And I'm like, what do you mean? Don't mention depression. It's like, that's not your portion in Jesus' name, you know? And I'm like, I kind of get where you're coming from a cultural standpoint, but I want to talk to you about it. You know, I want to open up to you about it. But you're telling me, no, it's not your portion. Yeah, exactly. You know, you're saying, box that off, it's that, and yeah, we're going to pray for it, and that's it. And it's sorted. And that's, like, I'm not taking that away from anyone, but that's not, you've also got to help yourself.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So me wanting to speak to my parents about it, they found it hard. And I think it almost kind of was like, who's done juju on my son?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know?
I know.
You know, or what have I done? Like, from a mum's point of view, like, what have I done wrong? And I'm like, Mum, it's not you. You're doing everything. It's just, I've been through a lot, and it's realising I've been through a lot, and it's taken its toll on me. That's how I've got to that point, you know?
And also, they think that it's not part of the family. No one's got it in the family. So they won't expect that. Yeah. So that's what it is mainly.
Perspectives, different views, one voice.
Yeah. You know, I'm really glad that you brought up your mum, your parents, and the family side, because I kind of wanted to get an idea from everyone, really, in terms of what kind of common misunderstandings or perceptions that we might have experienced at home and growing up.
I think for me, and I've just been listening to a lot of the stuff that Lawrence is saying, and it hits home because I've had in my family, there has been moments, especially schizophrenia, and I knew schizophrenia. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a close family member kind of went through that condition, and then I think in the African kind of way of dealing with some of these mental issues is very interesting. But I think for me, because of how I grew up, now I grew up a bit in Ghana before coming over here, so I have a bit of that culture going on, and I have a bit of the obviously European kind of ideology and stuff. So a lot of the times it's battling it. Because in the concept of Africa, Ghana, this is seen as some sort of witchcraft. Like, who's doing this to my child? Or why are they talking? Why are they just walking around? Why do they feel like they want to jump out the window or anything like that? Like, that's how they wanted to deal with it. Church, pastor, whatever, whoever is around to kind of like come on board to kind of, I don't know, heal you from your mental illness. And then obviously there was that challenge of me just, when you're looking at something, I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense because I'm a very logical person. So I'm looking at something and I'm looking at certain behaviours and I'm like, why is this person behaving like this? I could not get to grips with what this was. So I had a bit of that going on, but I feel like in especially within my family, these are conversations that I never had because everything is leave it to the God, the devil's a liar. So it's really difficult for people to come out to talk about some of these things that they're actually experiencing. And this particular situation, it came off, I think there was a lot of stress. The person had a lot of stress at a specific moment and they just didn't know how to deal with it. And it kind of just blew up into this kind of thing. So, yeah, I think, as Lawrence mentioned, there is that kind of ideology within the African community, anyway, where it's just more on, I have done something wrong. There's this voodoo man in the village somewhere that's doing something to my children. There's this gods that we need to appease. This is why we're suffering. That kind of mentality around mental illness.
What I think is maybe Lawrence can add into it is, I don't think they've heard the word before, depression or mental. Maybe in Western world they have, but in African itself, I don't think it's something that is spoken about or discussed or even taught. So for them, it's nothing because we work hard in Africa. We work in general, we work very hard. We go on a life, daily basis. For us, we wake up in the morning, we know what we need to do and get it done and then move forward. And then during the day, in the evening, focus and then start again in the next morning. And then when you come to the Western world, you see all about this stuff. You heard about all this stuff. He's been taught about all of this stuff. So as the first generation, as our family, when they come here, I don't think it's because they've heard about this stuff. I think it is new to them. and they might in Africa, especially in my country in Sierra Leone, when I went there, you have people are crazy. They just call it a crazy person. It's just maybe just the fact that something is done, someone's done to them. They've probably caused a trouble for them to be in that situation. They won't see in the fact that that person's probably has so much burden in them to go through that for them to be in that situation. That's the way we'll see it. But in a civilization, I'm not saying Africa is not, but in a civilization, is it something that you can able to learn with that person, grow with that person, and understand where that person is coming from, and then experience it. But Africa, because maybe we don't have the resources to understand it, so I think that's why it comes out like that, in a proportion like that.
Would you say, what personal experience have you had though in terms of mental illness, or if any?
Well, prior to what you guys were discussing, for me, where I work in construction industry, as you know, there's a lot of people in that kind of field, and it's crazy how you go to work because you got a lot of tools, you got a lot of equipment, and you see a lot of people that will snap out. So I have encountered some at work but not towards me directly, but where I work, construction, you get people just have problems. They've got bandages. They come to work. Maybe you might dismiss them. They don't understand. But because they're so stressed within themselves alone, they'll come with everything with it. So for me, as a manager in general, I know how to talk about, to just be their friend. I don't want to be a manager. I'm around them to express them, because sometimes I have the issue, my workers, where they have so much issue, they want to have a day off or half a day. I don't stress them out. I said, you know what, take your day, do what you need to do, come to work the next day, whatever, sort out what you need to sort out. And you get someone's that, I've heard accounting where someone has taken their tools and hit someone because the person, it was just a silly thing, but that silly thing extended because of they've got an issue. But yeah, sometimes we talk about, there's one recently we talked about, there's a thing called toolbox talk, which is a specific item on idea that we talk about. So we talk about mental health. And it was quite interesting how a lot of people in construction actually talk about it. They have it. And it's just to encourage them, because it's more pressure as well at work, and it's more, so within that pressure, if you don't deliver what you need to deliver, that's also can affect, and sometimes some people have their own problem out of work, so they bring it into it as well. So I had one a company, a director, where he has literally told me he's got mental health issue, and the way he deals with things, if he's angry, he take a phone, just dash it. Take the laptop, just dash it, you know? He doesn't care who he hits, but that's how he deals with it. And then within that, you just give him his time, and then he'll come back again, act like nothing never happened. So, yeah.
For me, I think, so from my personal experiences with mental health, well, so I grew up in a single-parent family. There's my mum, my two younger brothers, so there were three of us. And I mean, if my mum was ever going through anything that may have made her feel upset or depressed, she certainly didn't show it to me and my brothers. So in the environment that we grew up in, I guess it was quite positive. And so she's projected, I think seeing that projected that sort of feeling of positivity onto me. And so I guess growing up amongst friends, I would say I was someone who was extremely positive about things. I tried to always put the negative stuff to one side and not let it affect me in one way or another. But I think it was only after meeting my wife that I started to understand how important it was to sort of open up, because what I would say, but because I was so positive, if something was affecting me, I wouldn't speak about it. And there's a power in just speaking about things. You know, it's not even necessarily about saying, oh, you know, it's getting me down, I need to take medication or anything like that. I think that it's just important to just talk. You know, you get things off your chest, and, you know, and it might even sort of allow you to sort of think back to maybe even certain instances in your life that may have put you on a specific path. And as I said, yeah, me and my wife sort of allowed me to, and she's quite open, and she likes to talk a lot, so it sort of allowed me to open up and speak a bit more. And I wasn't even sure if I was even going to mention this on this podcast, but I do feel I'd like to. So me and my wife, we lost our daughter last year. She was stillborn at 8 months. And so I think that was probably my first interaction with some form of mental health, or even feelings of being depressed. And we're only 6 months away from that. We haven't had any counselling yet. We are due to start that at some point. And I would say even going through that time and speaking to like other people who've been through it. And one guy said to me, there's 7 stages of grief. So, and it's important to understand each one of them, because after it happened, I went back to work, and I said, I was getting on fine, and he said to me, is that like a masking mechanism? Going to work because you're not really addressing that there is an issue, and having the chance to speak about it. And I never thought about it like that. But I think after he said that, I could kind of see what he meant about going to work was, it masked what I was going through at that time, because in those hours where I was working, it allowed me to forget about what happened. But that's not the best way to deal with it, because if you don't, it can be like a pressure cooker. It gets to a point where you can explode. And if you explode, you just don't know how you're gonna behave. So I would say that's my experience.
And I'd just like to add to that is, I always take the analogy of Coca-Cola, and Mentos. If you put them in there, and you keep on putting it in there, it's going to explode. Whereas if you just take a normal Coke bottle and you release it slowly, it doesn't explode. So it's about having that conversation, And it's not necessarily, people don't want you to solve their problems for them. Understand that. They don't want an answer. Sometimes it's literally just speaking. And that's it.
But how do you speak to someone when they're just closing you off?
It's about having, just consistently checking in on them. And I find with digital media, it's easy to check in on people. So if I message one of you guys and say, how you doing? You can message me back and go, I'm good. If I phone you, I'm detecting something different in your voice.
Yes.
Which is, I'm not trying to, force you to talk about it, but it reminds me to check in on that person and not do it over WhatsApp. And if you're in a group as well and you're talking, people get lost in that group. And you feel like I've done my duty, I've kind of checked in on my boys and whatever. But for me, it's not really checking in on your boys. Do you see what I mean? And that's why I think it's good to do the old-fashioned way sometimes and pick up and have that telephone call. Because likewise, sometimes you don't even know the person that was sitting right next to you was going through something. And even when I was working at my school, I had this policy. If I'm walking down the corridor and I ask you how you are, and you start talking, I stop. Even, doesn't matter how busy I am, I stop and I listen. Because I found far too often, when I started out, how are you? And as they started talking, I'm already walking off.
Yeah.
So I'm just basically saying, I don't care.
You're not expecting them to say something. You're expecting I'm fine, and then we keep it moving. So they say, this, that, but you're walking around, you're like, but I've got lunch, I can eat somewhere.
Man, I think that's one of the main things, from your podcast, is about actually people having those conversations that you necessarily wouldn't have. And that's what stems back to my blog and stuff, is like, it's not just about me, it's actually the people that I might have impact on. And if it's one person and whatever, that's what it's all about, is sharing and just realising actually you're not going through it by yourself. Everyone's got a form of it,
And I picked up the point that you said, Kodjo, about just putting it to one side and just moving on, trying to move on. And you know, even with what I was going through, I remember, like, even growing up in an African household, like, the idea behind losing a child is you just move on and try again. But it's not that easy because, you know, it's not about having another child. You want the child that, you know, that passed away. It's not that easy. And sometimes I think it can be difficult to sort of understand psychologically how that affects you, or mentally how it affects you. That's what I wanted to add.
Is this what we were discussing, especially not to talk about it? Is this a stigma in an African thing? Is this?
I think 100%. I think it's a stigma not to talk about stuff and I think something Koja said there is like, particularly if you're a man, from what I've seen growing up, you're strong. You're the leader of the house, you know. Whereas I've shifted to that viewpoint, you know, is actually if I see Sharon as my partner, you know, I'm not going to have good days. And sometimes she's going to have to hold me up. She's not going to have good days. And equally, I'm going to have to hold her up. And I found that when I was opening up to her, she felt closer to me. I even think she felt that I was stronger because I was able to have those conversations. And she felt like she was able to have more conversations with me. So it's part and parcel. But going back to your original point, I do think it's a stigma. I do think it's, you know, you just get on with it. But it's okay not to be okay. Like, that's the one thing. And even with, like, with a man crying, so what? It's a release, you know? And I think if someone needs to cry, let them cry. It's a way of getting it out of their system, you know, and starting that process. You know, tears are there for a reason, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, definitely. I totally agree. It's a stigma as such, because the key thing that I kind of mentioned, even in my family, a lot of people don't know about this. And a lot of people don't know about this, and then I guess you have to then roll back the years to understand why, because sometimes there's like some sort of, within our families, there seems to be, for my mom's generation, there seems to be some sort of sibling rivalry. Oh, my children are doing well, this one is doing well, and all that kind of, it's not direct competition, but there seems to be something underneath going on. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So when it comes to actually sharing negative, I won't say negative news, but real news about what your children are going through, that's something they wouldn't want to share. It always goes back to that African saying, you don't hang your dirty laundry in public kind of stuff, right? And so when these things are coming out and then you're speaking to your mum and stuff, they do not expect you to be talking to other family members about it. Then it goes back to a lot of the stuff that you said, Lawrence, about the role of a man. And even yesterday, one of my cousins asked me, what's the role of the man? What is this thing about fitting in? What am I meant to be doing? And I'm like, there isn't any such role. You develop, you make those for yourself. It's not something that you have to fit in. Do you know what I mean? So definitely there's that stigma attached to it. Plus, obviously for me, it's like, and it goes back to the whole the devil is a liar stuff as well. This is what I'm saying, that sometimes you're balancing the two, because you're looking at it to say, regardless of whatever condition that you are in, it doesn't, for me, one thing I always believe in, regardless of whatever condition you're in, it doesn't stop you from achieving anything that you want to achieve. And for me, it's very important that I pass that on to my children. It's not that my children do not understand, they don't need to understand the conditions that they are in and to talk about it, but I can't let them see that as holding them back. Because for me, nothing should hold you back. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of the times when you're having these kind of conversations, but just based on Ali's thing, definitely the stigma is a big thing. And sometimes it's not a stigma that you might necessarily have, but it's a stigma that's been set. And it's like you have to fit into that whole model of how the family is set up kind of thing.
And just going to that point about, you know, not being able, or making sure they're able to reach the top, that goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning, adapting your situation, your lifestyle. It still means you can do it. It just means you might not use path A.
Yes, yeah.
You might have to go under the wall, you know, over the wall, break through the wall. You can still get to it, but it's about adapting, you know, and also using the resources that are around you. You know.
But for me, the key thing there is the understanding, because a lot of the times I've come across families where their children have a specific, like, I won't say illness, but a mental condition, and the children are not even aware of it. And it goes back to even this platform where I believe personally that in regards for us to uplift ourselves, we need to understand the conditions that we live in first.
Absolutely.
So for me, that's always a motto that I take on. Like, we can't keep fighting a war that we don't understand. So that's what I would say. That definitely, what you're saying. So added to it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting hearing all of you guys' personal experiences and how you've kind of seen the whole mental illness aspect growing up. I know with myself growing up, I would say I kind of identified 3 kind of aspects on it, some of which you've touched on, and it's more the judgment side, the shame side, and misunderstanding side. So what I found growing up in my community is, especially with our parents, they really, really took on the whole judgment side, as in it meant a lot to them how other people saw or perceived them and how they were being represented to other people in their community. So just things like, oh, you can't do this because you don't want someone coming to our house thinking that we're this and this kind of person or this and that. And I think with the whole mental illness side of things, or some kind of mental discomfort or uncomfortableness, you didn't want someone to judge you and see you in a certain way, as in, oh, why is this person acting like this or feeling like that? And then there's the shame side as well, in terms of, yeah, I feel depressed, but you're ashamed of feeling that way and you don't want to tell no one because you feel ashamed of feeling like that. In terms of my family kind of growing up and handling those sort of things, we were generally kind of positive atmosphere and stuff like that. But one of the things that my parents encouraged was like family meetings. So we did that literally from young, like from when I was like seven years old, whereby we would literally come meet together in the living room and everyone kind of talks about, all right, cool, what is troubling you? What do you have a problem with? This, that. And just seeing how each of us can support or help each other with that issue. I kind of see it now, looking back at it, as a great way of mental well-being for the family and things like that, which I would definitely try and implement to my family and kids going forward as well. And then it also just helped you understand other people's side of things. So you might disagree with someone with what they've done during a week or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then it's seeing their kind of things and what kind of led them to that situation. I'd never really... So one of my cousins had a very big traumatic incident that happened to him. And because in terms of direct cousins, I only had a few because my family all moved here from Uganda to the UK. And they lived not too far, but quite some distance. But they never ever told any of us what had happened to him. And in the end, he basically struggled so much with the incidents that they sectioned him. He was on medication and everything. And for us, we completely had no idea what happened to him. All we saw was kind of like the aftermath. So imagine seeing your cousin all the time and then not seeing him for a while, and then suddenly seeing him and he's now put on a lot of weight. He's not, when you know someone is not the same person as how they were before, but you can't put your finger on it. And then as being kids, you might tease them, but not really understanding what this person's just gone through. And I just feel like, as a community, do we feel that we can't explain this stuff to our young children? Like what someone else has gone through, or some kind of mental disorder or anything, and help them to tackle it a lot more better? Because if you don't know, then you're going to continue certain ways, but not understanding how this could be affecting that person in that way.
But I think I go with that shame thing, and I did feel that with depression. It was like, Lawrence is seen in this way, people see me here, and they think I'm up here and stuff like that. And once they heard about that, I'm going to be down, Then I remember mentioning that to one of my friends, and he was very blunt. He's like, who do you think you are? And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, I actually think it's big-headed of you that you think people have got time to go back into their house and discuss you. People have their own problems and what they're dealing with. So people will take you for who you are and who love you. So I think sometimes we put that pressure on ourselves and thinking about what other people thinking about us, where actually people don't actually go through the process and go, this, that. Don't get me wrong, people are caring and whatever, but they're not going home to the nth degree to discuss you. Do you see what I mean? And I think that's something we do put on ourselves. You know, I think particularly our generation. I get from the older generation, the whole shame thing is still quite big, but I think moving to us, I don't think it's us that put it basically on ourselves. I think so.
Perspectives, different views, one voice.
All right, well, I think that's a very interesting topic, and we could definitely keep going on more in terms of the different aspects of mental health and how it affects us all. Just to wrap up, how would you kind of leave this conversation at the moment, any of you guys, and what you're feeling?
For me, it's funny just looking back at this conversation. I didn't do no research. I didn't do anything on it. I just thought, you know what? Oh, yeah, I ain't seen Lawrence for a while. Let's just have a conversation with Lawrence. And then looking back at this, it's funny the stuff that I've actually shared that it's not like A, I prepared to share it. B, I didn't even think about it. And so for me, it just shows you the power of actually recording an episode even around mental health. Because I thought I'm an open book. Like, I normally talk a lot. I know I talk a lot. I can't help myself. I talk a lot. Like, and I say that because my last episode, I was listening, but I was like, Kojo, come on, man. You're always talking. So it's funny what I've been able to gain from this. Because I was just thinking of coming in here, understanding your challenges and how you're dealing with them. But then I now realize that I have mental health challenges that have been kind of like put in away and not really dealing with it. So I'm just grateful for that, for just even this conversation as such. And I guess there are things that I normally do, which is more conversations with people, just trying to understand. And I guess for me, it's almost like the skeleton in the closet. So I talk around everything, but not really go directly and open up that closet and just look in there to see some of these things that are hidden in there. So I'm really grateful for this conversation. And I guess a lot of the stuff that I'm going to take away is just some of the stuff that you guys talked about, just trying to deal with this.
I think for me, I share your sentiments, Kojo. I feel the same. I think before I heard you start speaking, Lawrence, obviously I had things in my head that I certainly wasn't going to, speak about. And it was only after hearing you speak and going through things in my head, I just sort of understood how important it was to talk about things, even if it's just for, I spoke about it for a few minutes. That in itself is helpful. I do feel like I was sort of addressing the mental challenges I'm dealing with as well, and I think it is important. And you mentioned about one of your colleagues or ex-colleagues who sees a therapist every week, and I think there's power in that as well, because even like when I watch like the Breakfast Club. And you hear Charlemagne talking about like he's been a big advocate of mental health recently, and he talks about seeing a therapist every week. He says that. He says he sees a therapist every week, and it would just be to talk about general stuff. And I think even within mainstream media, you're seeing a massive push for how you treat or how you deal with your mental health, because I think there's a massive understanding that we live in a world where so much things are going on and you have ups and downs all the time. So life is not perfect. So you need to have mechanisms to cope with those ups and downs. Life isn't always going to be, rosy. So, some people might self-medicate. Some people might use drugs. Some people might drink. Some people might talk to other people. But it's about finding useful mechanisms that can assist you, not those ones that can take you down the slippery slope. And I think that's why it's important to push mental health, and how you manage it, because as I said, it's an ongoing thing that we deal with every day.
For me, when we was talking about this, I kind of sounded a bit ignorant because I'm saying I didn't know much about it or anything, or as what Coach touched into, that even I didn't have a clue of doing research. It's not that. It's just from observing this and discussing this now, it's all about my upbringing. I think the upbringing had a great effect because I've never had a chance to be able to talk about whatever I was going through. Because as in this room right now, the person that knows me very well is Cam, and I can say sometimes I go through a hardship, but because of my upbringing to make me very strong, I don't deal with it in a sense where I feel like sometimes I'm depressed or having an issue with it myself. It's just I said, no, let me just get along with it and get it done. Eventually, it's temporary. I see it as a temporary. That's the key word I usually put to myself. However, so some people, as you mentioned, some people deal with it differently. But learn from this now is showing that actually speaking about certain things, even you have a friend that at least once in a week you talk to about anything. Sometimes you have your partner, even I have my missus. You do want to share sometimes with your missus certain things, but you want someone that you sometimes also grow up with to be able to talk to, even to check up and say, oh, how are you doing for the week? Or how is everything going? Because sometimes, as what we all mentioned right now, we have a lot going on. Media is one of a hell that, as you brought up, is one thing that a lot of people don't share about. And we neglect this kind of stuff and we kind of be ignorant to a sense because I go to work. Sometimes I'm pressure at work. But because of how I mentioned my upbringing, I say, no, what, it's a temporary, but let me just deal with it. And then I just deal with it. But at the end, I feel like, oh, that was very exhausted, right? But I push it. But as what we have mentioned, we all have a way of how to cope with stuff. For example, I didn't brought it up. I've got a brother that is autistic, for example. There's certain things that he deals with and how he does it that it affects him a greater sense of it. And as an older brother, I'm always there making sure that he's fine, he's okay, checking on him, all of that. Sometimes I had that as a baggage to be able to cope and know to think about. And it's not easy. And from learning from this, it's just that when I'm growing up, or I have my own family now, is that little minute, as what Coach says, sit down on a table, have a discussion, leave out the TV, leave out this cell phone, just have a meal. And sometimes even when my mum and missus cook, we cook together. So I just want to engage and understand her body language, her sense of understanding. She has a love language where she's more, she's more effective and like also words of information. She likes that. So if I don't give that kind of those two things, sometimes it's a bit, oh, I'm not in love with her or that kind of stuff. But I've learned more from this is that even my friends, there's certain friends that I do have is a pushing. It doesn't mean because they are pushing, I should just ignore it. Still continue, at least once a text. It's, oh, I hope you're okay. Just leave it like that. Even though they see the message, doesn't mean that they're ignoring you. They've seen it. That's what matters. And then just continue your day on by. And then obviously don't forget, as what you mentioned. So I've taken this, I've observed it, and now doing more about it is more important. And thank you for that, Lawrence.
Yeah, and I think just to add as well, sorry, you mentioned about friends that might be going through things and speaking to them too as well. And I think Ali touches on an important point because, as you also mentioned, Lawrence, some people just want to talk. It's not even tell you what they're going through. Some people don't want to go into that, but they just want someone to talk to. And I think that's important where you feel like friends might be going through something and even trying to push you away. I think key is just try and keep trying because, at some point you may eventually break free.
Totally agree with that. Just want to say a big thank you for having me on. I think the conversation we've had today has been powerful, and I'm going to actually use the word beautiful because I think the fact that I'm in the room with 4 other men and they've just opened up, and just said it, like what's on there. And a lot of you said I wasn't going to come here and speak about that. The mere fact that you've even shared a minute or whatever it is something you haven't potentially done in 30 years. So that's progress, and we got to celebrate that as progress. Yeah. And when it does hopefully go out to people, they will go, actually, I identify with that, And I was saying to Mo, when Mo sent me the brief over, the first thing I said to him, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying it.
Yeah,
like,
it's fine.
Can you change it from mental illness? Because I was like, as soon as you hear mental illness, it goes to a stigma, you know, and people tap out straight away and goes, I haven't got that. Whereas you go to mental health, mental well-being, we all have a duty to protect our mental well-being and make sure we're working on our mental well-being and protecting our energy, you know. So I think that's important. Very well checking in your mental well-being, you know, whatever it is you do during the week to make sure, you know, have that time out and touch base with where you are, you know, because the key thing is you need to know where you are in order to speak to other people.
Yep.
You know, you can't expect, and that's one of the things I did. I expected people just to get it, but how are they meant to get it if I can't tell them what's kind of going on with me? So I think that's one of the big things, you know, from this is like looking after your mental well-being, checking in on your mental well-being, and that can be done in any way that represents you doing that. There's no fixed way to do that, and yeah.
One more beautiful thing that you've mentioned. Every one of us in this life go through a mental issue. It might be depression, but it might be a scale of it, maybe 10%. But every single one of us go through with it. Maybe I deal with it in a way where it's calmer, but some people deal with it where it is extraordinary in another level. But every single one of us, if we don't, then I don't think that we are human. We all go through an issue. I think from seeing what we talked about, that is very important. Even at one point in my time, I think I do go through depression. But it might not be a severe depression where I'm going to go crazy. But it is there. It's just that tiny bit of it.
Yeah, I think we all have, just to echo what you just said there, we all have our moments of, you know, you feel isolated, you're kind of not sure, you know, what's wrong with me, and actually you just need to get out there, man, and just speak to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is all excellent, beautiful stuff. I like how everyone's kind of closed that off each. And I encourage everyone listening to have some kind of mental health check or well-being, just to see how you're getting on and how things are. And even if it is, as Kojo said, a stranger that you might do that check with or open up to, or a family member, just as long as you can have that kind of expression at some point throughout your day. Well, thank you for everyone that's joining the conversation today. This is the LDN Perspective podcast. If anyone listening has any concerns or wants to share anything that they've been experiencing or going through, I encourage you to message through our Instagram channels, which is LDN Perspective at Instagram. And thank you very much for coming down, Lawrence.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Perspectives, different views, one voice.